So today we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between credit cards and debit cards and the advantages and disadvantages of using both of them. So I've had the privilege of teaching this class several different times in person, so it's a little different this year talking to you about it over the camera, but we're going to give it a shot. So credit and debit cards are one of the ways that you can pay for things if you need to make a purchase. So you also can use cash or a check, but credit and debit cards are pretty common, although sometimes you see people using online services as well. Those are pretty similar to what debit cards are. So if you're using an online service like the Cash App or Venmo, or a lot of times even a PayPal program, that is actually coming directly from your bank account, which is exactly what a debit card is. So the difference between credit and debit. So credit is when you are actually kind of getting a loan to purchase something. So credit is the ability of a consumer to buy goods or services before you actually pay for them. And you have an agreement with that purchase that you're going to be paying for them at some future date later on. The credit card allows you to make those purchases, and then even though it's kind of like a limited personal loan that you're promising to pay back at a later time. And in most cases, you're paying interest on that if you pay for it longer than 20 or 30 days after that purchase, so depending on the terms of that credit card. A debit card, on the other hand, is a little card that you can use, which is tied directly to your bank account, and you're not allowed to actually use that card. They won't accept the transaction unless you already have the money in the bank to pay for it. So it's a little safer because it allows you to not spend more than you have the ability to pay back or get yourself into financial trouble. But sometimes you may not have the money in the account and you may need something. So a credit card would be important to purchase something that may be an important emergency. Maybe it's a repair on your car, or maybe it is a special gift that you need to get someone, and you just don't have the money right now and you need to get it right away. So this allows you to have a little more time and pay for it at a later date. So interest depends on what your credit score is. So anytime that you make a purchase, especially if you're using a credit card, that history is sort of tracked, and they want to know, the companies keep track of how long it takes you to repay that money that you have on your credit card that you have borrowed, essentially. So the better that your credit history is, the more reliable you are to repay that loan, the less interest they're going to charge you. In most cases, credit cards usually are about an 18% interest rate. So if you can't pay your credit card off right away, every $100 that you spend, if it took you a year to pay that off, you'd be paying $118 for that purchase. So credit cards can be very valuable, but if you don't have the ability to pay them off every month when you get your bill, you probably shouldn't use them. You should try to avoid using them as much as possible if you can't pay that balance off every month. But if you can pay the balance off every month, most credit cards have a special, I guess a perk you could say in place that you get cash back, or you get additional credit or points when you make purchases. So you can actually buy something for less than it costs because you're going to get money back for those purchases. However, if you don't pay your bill off every month, the interest is going to far exceed the credit that you'd get for that perk for making that purchase. So please keep that in mind, and that's really important. The debit cards are probably a lot more common, used for people who maybe struggle with a budget, who may not have the ability to pay off a bill at the end of a month that's larger than what their income is. So the debit card really helps them stay within the budget that they have and not exceed their spending ability, their spending limits that they may have. So setting a budget is really important. So whether you are working from at home and doing like babysitting or helping with chores around the house, and maybe your parents give you a little bit of money for that, or maybe you have a part-time job, you can still use that money that you earn to set a budget, figuring out what you spend money on. How often do you maybe go to the movies or go out to get something to eat? Or do you have to buy school clothes? Or do you have money that you like to spend on entertainment? you can keep track of how much money those things cost you on a monthly basis, and then you can figure how much money do I earn on a monthly basis. And hopefully you earn more than you spend. If you don't, then you definitely shouldn't be using that credit card. Families usually set up budgets for all kinds of things, like how they run their household. They have expenses such as food, maybe their utilities, the rent that they pay or their mortgage, an expense for their car and gasoline, and then also important things like clothing and entertainment also that may come into play. So it's really important to set a budget so you can track how much money you're spending. So your debit card is tied to a checking or savings account. So it's important to know that those two things are linked together, and you do not want to use your debit card if you don't have enough money in the bank, because you can then have what they call an overdraft charge. They may not even let you use the debit card, but that overdraft charge can cause penalties for you, and it can cause you to have money taken out of your bank account to cover the bank fees. The credit card is really beneficial when you can pay it off every month, as I suggested, but it's not tied to your bank account. Therefore, it won't really matter what your balance is in there at the time. You can always then take care of that bill at a later time. That interest fee that you have, which I mentioned, that can vary, but if you don't pay your bill on time, not only will you have the cost of the interest charge and fee on that credit card, but pretty much all credit card companies will charge a late fee for payments received after the due date, and that can be $29, $39, $49, which oftentimes can be as much as what you owed on the card for your minimum amount. So credit cards always give you the opportunity to pay a minimum. You don't have to pay the whole bill off, but remember, if you don't pay the whole bill off, that's where the expenses continue to add up, and you end up paying a lot more for the item that you purchased than it actually cost. So that's just not smart business. I also encourage people to try to monitor their credit cards. Sometimes charges can show up on your credit card statement that you didn't make. So it's really important to look at all the charges that are on your credit card statement and make sure that there's not something there inappropriately or fraudulently. And if there is, you call and challenge that, and they may be able to remove that so it doesn't negatively affect you and you don't pay for something that you didn't really purchase. If you have a good relationship with your credit card company, you also have the ability to get charges waived. Sometimes your interest fees or your late fees, if you happen to overlook paying a bill in a timely manner, sometimes they will waive those fees for you if you have a good history with them of paying your bills on time. It never hurts to ask, and that can also be something that can be a big savings to you. So that's the information that I have on credit and debit cards. Your teacher is probably going to give you a little question and answer survey with a bunch of information on when you'd be more likely to use a credit or a debit card, or maybe it's appropriate in that situation that you use both. I hope you find that exercise interesting, and thank you for your time today.